The rain had not stopped falling for 3 days. And on the fourth night, the most feared man in Seoul sat alone in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, staring at a photograph he had not looked at in years. A woman's laugh echoed somewhere in his memory, unbidden, impossible to silence. Then his phone rang. The caller ID read a name he had buried deeper than any secret, deeper than any grave. And something cracked open inside him that he had spent an entire empire trying to seal shut. Welcome, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell me where you are watching from. His name was Choi Soo-hwan. And if you had asked anyone in Seoul what they knew about him, they would have given you one of two answers. Either they would go pale and look the other way, or they would straighten their spine and say his name like a prayer. He was 36 years old. He owned 3 buildings in Gangnam, 2 underground gambling rings that no police force in the country had managed to shut down, and a reputation that preceded him into every room he entered before he even opened his mouth. People called him the architect. Not because he built things. Because he designed systems that other people lived and died inside of, and none of them ever saw the blueprint until it was already too late. Soo-hwan had not gotten to where he was by being soft. He had crawled out of a childhood that smelled like cheap alcohol and broken promises, clawed his way through a world that rewarded cruelty, and built an empire on the wreckage. He did not flinch. He did not hesitate. He did not let anyone close enough to see the seams. But on that fourth night, holding that photograph, something shifted. Something he had spent years convincing himself was dead. And her name was Adiz. She was 29, black, beautiful in the way that made people stare a beat too long, and entirely unaware of the storm she was about to walk straight into. She was a registered nurse at Seoul National University Hospital. She worked 12-hour shifts that bled into 14, sometimes 16. She smiled at patients who screamed at her. She smiled at coworkers who whispered behind her back. She smiled at the hospital administrator who had, on more than one occasion, made her feel like she was doing everyone a favor simply by showing up. And behind every single one of those smiles was a woman who was quietly, slowly breaking apart. Because her mother was sick. Not the kind of sick that gets better with rest and vitamins. The kind of sick that steals everything piece by piece and leaves you standing in the wreckage wondering how much time you actually have left. But Adiz did not let anyone see that. Not the coworkers. Not the patients. Not even the man she had been dating for the better part of 3 years. His name was Raymond. Korean, handsome, charming in the way that made mothers at church lean over and whisper that one to their daughters. He and Adiz had started dating back in high school, back when everything was simpler and the world was still something you believed you could shape with your own 2 hands. They had stayed together through college, through nursing school, through the kind of distance and pressure that destroys most relationships before they even get a chance to breathe. Raymond was good to her. Not perfect, but good. And sometimes, good is the thing you hold on to when everything else in your life is on fire. Soo-hwan had known Adiz once, a long time ago. Back when he was not the architect. Back when he was just a quiet, intense Korean boy at an international school in Incheon, sitting 3 rows behind a laughing black girl who wore her hair in braids and had a way of making everyone in the room feel like they mattered. Back when he had never told her any of that. Back when the only place he had ever let his guard down was on a single folded piece of paper, tucked into a metal box, buried in the ground behind the school gymnasium with a promise that they would dig it up again in 10 years. That was 11 years ago. And the box was about to come open. The next morning, Adiz woke up at 4:47 a.m. Not because her alarm went off. Because her phone buzzed with a message from her mother's oncologist, a dry, clinical update that read like a weather report predicting the end of the world. She read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on the nightstand, stared at the ceiling for exactly 90 seconds, and got up to make coffee. This was her routine. This was what she did. She did not cry in the mornings. She cried later, if at all, and only when the water was running and no one could hear. Raymond was already gone. He had left early for work, left a note on the kitchen counter that said "Love you" in his neat handwriting. She read it, folded it, and put it in the drawer where she kept all his notes. There were a lot of them in that drawer. He was good at that, at the small gestures. She showered, dressed in her scrubs, and drove to the hospital in a silence that felt heavier than any conversation. The floor she worked on was called the 4th floor, but the nurses called it the graveyard shift, regardless of what time it was, because the patients there were the ones no one else wanted to deal with. The difficult ones. The angry ones. The ones who had been waiting too long and were not afraid to tell you exactly how they felt about it. Adiz was assigned to a new charge nurse that week. A woman named Dr. Park, who was not actually a doctor but carried herself like one, and who had a habit of making the newer nurses feel like they had personally ruined the entire hospital simply by existing. Dr. Park did not like Adiz. No one had ever said this out loud, but everyone felt it. The way she assigned shifts. The way she left the hardest patients on Adiz's list. The way she never, not once, said thank you. Adiz smiled through all of it. By the time her shift ended that evening, she was running on 4 hours of sleep, 2 cups of cold coffee, and a quiet fury that she had nowhere to put. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, washed her face, and checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Raymond. 1 text that said, "Dinner tonight? I found that place you liked." She typed back a heart emoji and told him she would be there by 8. Then she scrolled, the way everyone does when they are too tired to move but too wired to stop. Instagram. A post from a college friend showing off a vacation. A Reddit thread about nurses who had finally quit toxic workplaces and felt free for the first time in years. She read the whole thread. Every single comment. Then she closed the app and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, not crying, just breathing. Later that night, Adiz sat across from Raymond at a small Korean restaurant tucked into a side street in Itaewon. The place was warm and close, the kind of spot that felt like it belonged to them and no one else. He had ordered her favorite dish without being asked. He did things like that. He paid attention. "How was your shift?" he asked, tearing off a piece of lettuce to wrap around his rice. "Long," she said. And then, because that was what she always said, and because he always nodded and moved on, she added something different. "Dr. Park gave me 7 patients today. 7. And then told me I was taking too long on my rounds." Raymond frowned. "That's not okay." "No," Adiz said. "It's not." They looked at each other across the table. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. But something sat between them in that moment that neither of them named. A quiet, patient distance that had been growing for months, the kind that does not announce itself with arguments or tears, but simply builds, the way silt builds at the bottom of a river. Until one day you look down and the water is not as deep as you thought it was. "I love you," Raymond said. "I love you too," Adiz said. And she meant it. She did. But meaning it and feeling it close enough to touch are 2 very different things. A few days later, the email came. It was from the school. The international school in Incheon where both Adiz and Soo-hwan had attended years ago. The subject line was simple: time capsule ceremony, alumni invitation. The body of the email explained that the school was renovating the back courtyard and that several time capsules buried by former students over the years had been discovered. The school was organizing a small event for alumni to come collect theirs. Adiz read the email 3 times. Then she sat very still for a long time. She remembered the afternoon clearly. She remembered the way the sun had hit the grass behind the gymnasium. She remembered the small metal box, the kind you could buy at any hardware store, and the way a quiet Korean boy with sharp eyes and an even sharper jaw had insisted they bury something inside it. Not just anything. Something real. Something honest. Something that would wait for them. She had written a note inside. Something small and light. A joke, mostly. A list of things she hoped would be true in 10 years. She did not remember exactly what was on it. She remembered that he had written something too. She had seen him fold the paper carefully, twice, before he put it in the box. He had not shown her what it said. She had not thought about that afternoon in years. And yet, the moment she read the email, it came back to her with a clarity that startled her. The way he had looked at her when they sealed the box. Not the way boys usually looked at her. Not with the easy, sliding attention that came and went like wind. Something else. Something heavier. She forwarded the email to Raymond and told him she was thinking of going. He responded with a thumbs up and a smiley face. She stared at that response for longer than she should have. Raymond called her that afternoon, just to check in. He did that sometimes, the small, quiet gestures that had built the architecture of their relationship over the years. A call in the middle of the day. A voice note that said nothing important. A bag of her favorite snacks left on the kitchen counter with no note, because she would know. She answered on the third ring, still in her scrubs, leaning against the wall of the hospital corridor with the fluorescent lights buzzing above her. "Hey," he said. "Just wanted to hear your voice." "Hey," she said back. And she meant it, the warmth in it, the ease. Raymond had a way of making even the smallest moments feel like they were enough. "You still good for tonight?" he asked. She closed her eyes. The corridors smelled like antiseptic and old coffee and the kind of quiet desperation that hospitals carry in their walls. "Yeah," she said. "I will be home by 7. "I will cook," he said. "You do not have to." "I want to," he said. And the simplicity of it, the way he said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, made her chest tighten in a way she could not explain. They hung up. She stood in the corridor for a moment longer, holding her phone, feeling the weight of something she could not yet name pressing against the inside of her ribs. Meanwhile, in a penthouse in Gangnam, Soo-hwan was having a very different kind of morning. He did not get emails about old school events. He did not check his inbox for things like that. But his assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Yuna who had worked for him for 4 years and had seen enough to never flinch, had forwarded it to him with a single line underneath, "Thought you might want to know about this." Soo-hwan read the email. He set his phone down. He picked up his coffee. He set the coffee down. Then he picked the phone back up and read it again. He had not thought about that box in years. Not consciously, anyway. But there were nights, rare nights, when the empire was quiet and the guards were at the door and the city below him was just a sea of lights, when his mind would drift back to Incheon. To the courtyard. To the way she had laughed when the box was too small for everything they wanted to put inside it, and they had to fold their notes into smaller and smaller shapes just to make them fit. He had written her a letter. A real one. Not a joke. Not a list. A confession. 11 years ago, at 25, with the world still ahead of him and no one watching, he had written down every single thing he felt about her. The girl who laughed too loud and walked through rooms like she owned them and had no idea, absolutely no idea, what she did to him every time she so much as said his name. He had buried that letter in the ground and told himself it was gone forever. It was not gone. And now, in approximately 9 days, someone was going to dig it up. The next day, Soo-hwan did something he almost never did. He went to visit someone without a reason. He drove to the small apartment of a man named Tae-sik, someone he had known since childhood, someone who had survived the same streets and come out the other side with a dry sense of humor and a talent for saying exactly the thing no one else was willing to say. They sat on Tae-sik's balcony, which overlooked a narrow alley full of street food vendors and the kind of noise that Seoul never fully shuts off, and they drank soju without talking for a while. This was something they did sometimes. Not often. But when Soo-hwan needed to be around someone who did not treat him like a weapon or a deity. "I have a problem," Soo-hwan said, eventually. Tae-sik did not look up from his glass. "You always have a problem. This one is different." Tae-sik looked up then. Something in Soo-hwan's voice. Something that did not belong there. Something that sounded dangerously close to uncertainty. Different how? Soo-hwan told him. Not all of it. Just enough. The box. The letter. The ceremony. The fact that in 9 days, everything he had carefully, deliberately kept locked away was going to be handed back to him in broad daylight, in front of strangers, with no way to stop it. Tae-sik listened. Then he said, "So don't go." "I have to go." "Why?" Soo-hwan did not answer that. He poured another glass of soju and drank it in one swallow. "Because she's going to be there," Tae-sik said. Not a question. Soo-hwan said nothing, which was the same as saying yes. Tae-sik leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Soo-hwan, you run one of the most dangerous organizations in this country. You have made men twice your age afraid to be in the same room as you. And right now, you are sitting here looking like someone just pulled the ground out from under you. Because of a girl from high school." "She is not just a girl from high school," Soo-hwan said, and the way he said it made Tae-sik go quiet for the rest of the evening. 5 days before the ceremony, Adiz had a bad shift. Not bad in the way that shifts are usually bad, with the usual chaos of understaffed floors and difficult patients. Bad in a way that felt personal. Dr. Park had reassigned 3 of her patients that morning without warning and replaced them with the most difficult case on the floor, a man who had been verbally abusive to every nurse who came near him. When Adiz had gone to his room, he had looked at her with open contempt and said something about her that she would not repeat to anyone. She had smiled. She had taken his vitals. She had charted his medications. She had done her job. And then she had gone to the supply closet at the end of the hallway, closed the door, and stood in the dark for 3 minutes with her hand pressed flat against the wall, breathing slowly, until the tightness in her chest loosened enough to let her move again. When she came out, her colleague, a younger nurse named Soo-yeon, was waiting in the hallway. Soo-yeon was 24, had been on the floor for 6 months, and had already developed the nervous habit of glancing over her shoulder whenever Dr. Park walked by. "Are you okay?" Soo-yeon asked. "I'm fine," Adiz said. And she smiled. Soo-yeon looked at her for a moment, the way people look when they know the answer is a lie, but they also know it would be rude to say so. Then she nodded and walked away. That evening, Adiz called her mother. Her mother, whose name was Blessing, was staying in a facility in Busan that specialized in long-term cancer care. The call was short because her mother tired easily now. But Blessing's voice, even weakened, carried the same warmth it always had, the same low hum of something unshakable. "How are you, baby?" Blessing asked. "I'm good, Mama." "You're lying." Adiz laughed. A real laugh. The kind that surprised her. A little bit. "Tell me." So she told her. Not about work. About the email. About the time capsule. About the boy who had been so quiet back then that she had almost forgotten he existed, except that somehow she had not forgotten him at all. Blessing was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Go to that ceremony, Adiz." "I was planning to." "Good. And when you open that box, whatever is inside it, whatever that boy wrote down, you read it. You read it all the way through. And then you sit with it for a while before you decide what it means." "Why?" Blessing laughed softly. "Because some things take time to open. And some things have been waiting a very long time." The night before the ceremony, Adiz could not sleep. She lay in the dark of her and Raymond's shared apartment, listening to him breathe beside her. He slept easily, deeply, the way people do when they do not carry much in their bodies at night. She loved that about him. She loved that he could do that. But she could not stop thinking about the box. She turned onto her side and looked at him in the dim light from the window. His face was smooth, unguarded. He looked younger when he slept. He looked like the boy she had first noticed in the cafeteria in 11th grade, the one who smiled at her before she had even introduced herself, the one who made it all feel easy. She reached out and touched his arm gently. He stirred but did not wake. "I love you," she whispered. And she meant it. She did. But there was something else there too, underneath the love, something she could not name yet. Something that had been sitting there for a long time, quiet and patient, waiting for her to be ready to look at it. The ceremony was held on a bright Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that felt almost mocking in its cheerfulness. The school courtyard had been cleaned and landscaped, and a small crowd of alumni milled around a table where the recovered capsules were laid out, each one labeled with a name and a year. Adiz arrived alone. Raymond had had something come up, a work thing, and he had apologized in the way he always apologized, with a genuine look of regret that she had never doubted was real. She had told him it was fine. She had meant that too. She walked through the courtyard slowly, taking in the details. The gymnasium was still there, though it had been repainted. The patch of grass behind it where they had buried the box was gone, replaced by a paved walkway, but the spot was the same. She could feel it the way you can feel a place that holds something of you, even when the ground has changed. She found her name on the table. The box was small, dented, slightly rusted around the edges. She picked it up and turned it over in her hands. And then she looked up. He was standing 20 feet away. She did not recognize him immediately. Not the way people recognize each other in movies, with that sudden, golden certainty. It was slower than that. It started with something familiar in the way he stood, shoulders back, jaw set, the same quiet intensity she remembered from years ago, but wrapped now in something harder, something that had been forged in fire she could not see. He was taller than she remembered. His hair was darker, shorter. He wore a black coat that looked like it cost more than her monthly salary, and his hands were in his pockets, and he was looking at her with an expression that she could not read at all. Then their eyes met, and something locked into place. "Adiz," he said. She blinked. And then the name came back to her, not all at once, but in a slow wave, like water filling a space she had not known was empty. "Suhwan," she said. He nodded. Once. And then something happened to his face that she had never seen before, not on him, not on anyone. A crack. Small, fast, gone almost before it appeared. But she saw it. "You look different," she said, because she did not know what else to say. "So do you," he said. And then, quieter, in a way that did not sound like a compliment, but felt like one, good different. They stood there for a moment, the courtyard busy around them, alumni laughing and talking and opening their capsules with the casual joy of people who had not thought about these boxes in years. But Adiz and Suhwan stood still in the middle of it, and the space between them felt charged, the way air feels before lightning. "Did you find yours?" she asked, nodding toward the table. He held up a box identical to hers. Same size. Same rust. "Have you opened it?" she asked. "Not yet." She looked down at her own box. Her fingers curled around the small latch. "Do you want to open them together?" she asked. He looked at her for a long time. And then he said yes. They walked to a bench near the edge of the courtyard, away from the crowd, where a row of old trees cast long shadows in the afternoon light. They sat down, not close, not far. The bench was wooden, worn smooth by years of people sitting and thinking and watching the world go by. Adiz opened her box first. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small photograph of the two of them, taken by someone else at some school event, laughing at something neither of them could remember. She unfolded the paper. It was her note. Her list. She read it quietly, smiling at some of it, feeling a tightness in her chest at other parts. Things she had hoped for that had come true. Things she had hoped for that had not. She looked up. Soo-hwan was holding his box, still closed. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on it like it was something dangerous. "Are you going to open it?" she asked. He did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, almost careful. "I know what is inside." "Okay. It is something I wrote a long time ago. Something I said that I have never said out loud." She looked at him. The afternoon light caught the side of his face, and for a second, he looked exactly like the boy she remembered, the quiet one, the one who sat 3 rows back and never said much, but always seemed to be paying attention to everything. "You don't have to tell me what it says," she said. He turned to look at her then, and something in his expression shifted. Not the crack from before. Something else. Something slower, deeper. Something that looked a lot like the thing you feel when you have been holding your breath for a very long time, and you finally let it out. "I know," he said. "But I think you should read it." He handed her the box. She looked at him. He looked back at her. Neither of them moved for a long time. Then she opened it. The paper inside was folded exactly the way she had seen him fold it, years ago, twice over, precise and careful. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was neat, controlled, nothing like the messy scrawl she might have expected from a teenage boy. It was the handwriting of someone who had thought about every word before he wrote it down. She read. The courtyard sounds faded. The laughter of the alumni, the distant traffic, the birds in the trees, all of it went quiet. There was only the paper and the words on it, and the man sitting beside her, not looking at her, staring straight ahead with his hands folded in his lap and his jaw clenched like he was bracing for impact. She read every word. Twice. Then she sat very still for a long time, the paper resting on her lap, and she did not say anything at all. The silence stretched. Soo-hwan did not break it. He did not fidget, did not glance at her, did not ask what she was thinking. He just sat there, in the shadow of the old trees, and he waited. And the waiting cost him something. She could see that. In the way his hands had tightened in his lap. In the way his breathing had gone slightly uneven. This man, who she was beginning to understand was feared by people who feared almost nothing, was sitting beside her and being afraid. Finally, Adiz folded the paper gently, carefully, and held it in both hands. Soo-hwan, she said. He turned to look at her. Did you mean this? She asked. When you wrote it, did you mean every word? He held her gaze. And for the first time since she had seen him that afternoon, he did not look guarded. He did not look controlled. He looked open and raw and terrified and honest in a way that she had not expected from anyone, let alone from a man who carried himself like the world owed him something. Yes, he said. I meant every word. She nodded slowly. Then she looked down at the paper again, at his handwriting, at the words she had just read, and something in her expression shifted. Not a smile, exactly. Something quieter. Something that looked like a door opening, just a crack, after being closed for a very long time. I did not know, she said. I know you did not know. Back then. I did not know you felt that way. I know. She looked at him again. And this time, she smiled. A real one. Small, private, the kind of smile that felt like it was meant only for him. Thank you for telling me, she said. Even if it took 11 years and a rusty metal box. Something happened to his face when she said that. Something cracked open. And for just a second, Choi Soo-hwan, the man they called the architect, the man who had built an empire on the wreckage of everything that had ever tried to break him, looked exactly like the quiet boy who had sat 3 rows back and watched her laugh and written down the bravest thing he had ever written. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Something shifted in his expression, the softness pulling back, the walls sliding quietly back into place. "I have to go," he said. "I am sorry." "It's okay," she said. He stood. He looked down at her for a moment, the way someone looks at something they are not sure they will see again. Then he nodded and walked away. Adiz sat on the bench for a long time after he left. She held his letter in her hands and looked at the shadows moving across the courtyard and thought about all the things she had not said. That evening, she went home. Raymond was on the couch, watching something on his laptop, and he looked up when she walked in and said, "Hey, how was the thing?" "It was good," she said. "Did you open your box?" "I did." "Anything good inside?" She paused. And then she said, "Yeah, something good." He smiled and went back to his screen. Adiz walked past him and into the bathroom and closed the door. She turned on the water. And she stood there, in the steam, holding Soo-won's letter against her chest, and she cried. Quietly. The way she always did. Not because she was sad. She was not entirely sure what it was. The next morning, she woke up thinking about him. Not in the way you think about someone you used to know. In the way you think about someone you are only just beginning to understand. She picked up her phone and typed a message. Then deleted it. Then typed another one. Then deleted that too. Finally, she opened her contacts, found the number he had written on the back of his box, because of course he had, because he was someone who planned things, who thought 3 steps ahead, who left doors open even when he walked through them alone. And she typed something simple. "I think we should talk. If you want to." She hit send before she could change her mind. The reply came in 45 seconds. "Tell me when." She stared at the screen. 45 seconds. He had been waiting. She typed back, "Tonight. Somewhere quiet." His response, "I know a place." And he did. The place Soo-won knew was not a restaurant. It was not a cafe or a bar or any of the usual places people go when they are trying to pretend that what is happening between them is casual. It was a private room on the top floor of a building in Uedo that looked, from the outside, like nothing at all. A plain door. A short elevator ride. And then, suddenly, a space that was all dark wood and low light and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Han River like it was something that belonged to him. Adiz walked in and stopped. "You live here?" she asked. "Not here," he said. He was standing by the windows, hands in his pockets, the city light behind him making him look like something out of a film she had not agreed to be in. "This is just a place I come when I need to think." She looked around. There was a long table, a few chairs, a shelf with bottles she did not recognize, and nothing else. No personal photographs. No clutter. No evidence that a human being spent any real time here. It was the room of someone who had learned to exist without taking up space. "It's very clean," she said. He almost smiled. "Almost. I am a clean person." She turned back to him. They looked at each other across the room, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was full. Thick with things that had not been said yet. Things that were waiting to be spoken out loud. "So," she said, and sat down at the table. "Let's talk." He sat across from her. Not too close. Not too far. "What do you want to know?" he asked. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "Everything. But let's start with the easy stuff first." He raised an eyebrow. "There is easy stuff?" "There is if we start with what you do now. Because I have a feeling it is not simple." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. She had guessed right, and they both knew it. So he told her. Not all of it. Not the details that would have made her flinch or look away. But enough. He told her about the business empire he had built, the kind that existed in the spaces between legal and illegal, in the gray areas where money moved quietly and no one asked too many questions. He told her about the people who worked for him, the loyalty he had earned, the fear he had cultivated. He told her it with no pride and no shame, just a flatness that made it sound like he was describing the weather. Adiz listened without interrupting. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She kept her eyes on his face the whole time, steady and calm, and when he finished, she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. He blinked. "Okay, okay," she said again. "That is what you do. I heard you. Now tell me something real." He looked at her. And for a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped again. That crack. That raw, unguarded thing beneath it all. "What do you mean by real?" he asked. "I mean something that costs you something to say." The room was very quiet. Outside, the city hummed and glittered, indifferent to the two of them sitting in this small, clean space trying to find their way back to each other after 11 years of silence. Suhwan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I have spent a very long time being afraid of very few things. But I was afraid of that box. I was afraid of what would happen if you read what was inside it." "Why?" "Because it would mean that you knew. And once you know something about someone, it changes the way they look at you. And I did not want the way you looked at me to change." She tilted her head slightly. "Change how?" He held her gaze. "I did not want you to look at me with pity. Or with obligation. Or with the kind of softness that people put on when they are trying to be kind to someone who has just made themselves vulnerable." "And what do I look like right now?" she asked. He studied her face. Really looked at her. And then something eased in his expression, something that had been wound tight for a long time. "You look like you are not afraid of me," he said. "I am not afraid of you." "You should be." "Probably," she said. And then she smiled. "But I have met scarier things than you, Suhwan." He stared at her. And this time, the almost smile broke through. A real one. Small, quick, gone before it fully formed, but it was there. It was real. They talked for 3 hours. Not about the heavy things the entire time. About small things too. About the school. About the teachers they remembered and the ones they had already forgotten. About what they had done in the years since, the paths they had taken, the places they had lived. Adiz told him about nursing school, about the long shifts and the difficult patience, and the way the job had taught her how to be strong in ways she had not expected. She told him about her mother, about the cancer, about the way Blessing still laughed on the phone even when everything was falling apart. Suhwan listened the way he had always listened, back then. Carefully. Completely. Like every word she said was something he intended to keep. At some point, he poured her a glass of water without being asked. At some point, she leaned forward in her chair without realizing she had done it. At some point, the distance between them on the table shrank, inch by inch, until their elbows were almost touching and neither of them acknowledged it. When she finally looked at her phone, it was past midnight. "I should go," she said. "I will have someone drive you." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to," he said. "I want to." She looked at him. There it was again. That thing in his voice. That quiet insistence that did not sound like control. It sounded like something else entirely. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." He walked her to the elevator. They stood together in the small space, the doors about to close, and for a second the air between them got very tight, very charged, the way it does when two people are standing close enough to feel each other's warmth and neither of them has moved away. "Suhwan," she said. "Yes." "The letter. The one you wrote. In the box." He went very still. "I kept it," she said. He looked at her. And the expression on his face was something she would not forget for a long time. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was quiet. Because it was the expression of someone who had just been told that something they had buried and forgotten and given up on was still alive somewhere, being held by someone who had chosen to hold it. "Good," he said. Softly. The elevator doors opened. She stepped out. She did not look back, because she knew that if she did, she would not want to leave. The next few days were strange. Adiz went back to work. She did her shifts. She smiled at the patients and the coworkers and the system that ground her down a little more every week. She called her mother. She came home to Raymond, who kissed her on the cheek and asked about her day and meant it. But underneath all of it, something had shifted. Something had moved in a way that could not be moved back. She thought about Soo-hwan constantly. Not in the way she had thought about men before, not with the easy, surface-level pull of attraction. This was deeper. This was the kind of thinking that felt less like wanting and more like remembering. Like a part of herself that she had not known was missing had suddenly turned up after all these years, and she was still figuring out where to put it. She did not tell Raymond. This was the thing that kept her up at night. Not guilt, exactly. Something more complicated than that. She and Raymond had been together for so long that their lives had become woven together in ways that were difficult to untangle. She loved him. She did. But the love she felt for him was the kind that had been built over years of proximity and habit and shared mornings and quiet evenings. It was real. It was warm. And it was also, she was beginning to realize, comfortable in the way that a sweater is comfortable. Something you wore because it fit, because it was familiar, because you had stopped noticing the shape of it. What she felt when she thought about Soo-hwan was not comfortable at all. It was loud and sharp and alive in a way that scared her a little. On Thursday, she called him. She did not plan it. She was in the supply closet again, the one at the end of the hallway, the one where she went when the tightness in her chest got too heavy to carry in public. It was a habit she had developed months ago, and she had never told anyone about it. Not even Raymond. She typed his number. Then she called. He answered on the second ring. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. A pause. Not awkward. Full. "Bad day?" he asked. And the way he asked it, without any preamble, without any performance, told her that he already knew. That he could hear it in her voice the way a surgeon reads a scan. "Yeah," she said. "Bad day. Tell me." So she told him. About Dr. Park. About the patient who had said something ugly. About the way the hospital made her feel, sometimes like she was not a person but a function, a thing that showed up and did the work and was never supposed to have feelings about any of it. He listened. He did not try to fix it. He did not tell her it would get better, or that she was strong, or any of the things people say when they want you to stop talking about the thing that is hurting you. He just listened. And when she was done, he said, "You deserve better than that." 3 words. That was all. But the way he said them, low and certain and with a weight behind them that felt less like sympathy and more like a statement of fact, made something in her chest loosen for the first time in weeks. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not telling me it will be okay." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "It will not always be okay. But you will be." She smiled. He could not see it. But somehow, she thought he might have felt it. They started talking every day after that. Sometimes it was short. A quick message in the morning, a voice note during a break, a text at night that said nothing important and everything at the same time. Sometimes it was longer, an hour on the phone at night when Raymond was asleep and Adiz was sitting on the floor of the bathroom with the water running, whispering into the dark. She knew what this was. She was not naive. She was not the kind of woman who confused herself about these things. What was happening between her and Soo-hwan was not friendship. It was not casual. It was not the kind of thing you could fold up and put away and pretend was not there. It was something that had been waiting a very long time to happen. And she did not know what to do about it. A week after the ceremony, Soo-hwan did something that surprised her. He sent flowers to the hospital. Not to her specifically. Not in a way that anyone would connect to him. Just a bouquet, delivered to the nursing station on the 4th floor, with a small card that said, "For the nurses. You're seen." No name. No signature. Adiz found out about it from Soo-yun, who came running up to her in the hallway, eyes wide, holding the card. "Did you see this?" Soo-yun said. Someone sent flowers. For us. For all of us. Adiz looked at the card. She read the words. And she felt something crack open in her chest, something warm and wide and impossible to close. She did not say anything to Suyeon. She just nodded and smiled and walked away before her face could give her away. That night, she texted him. I know that was you. His reply came in 30 seconds. I don't know what you are talking about. She typed back, liar. A pause. Then, maybe. She stared at the screen, holding her phone against her chest in the dark, and she felt something that she had not felt in a very long time. Something that was not about survival or duty or the slow, grinding weight of everything she carried every single day. Something that felt, for the first time in months, like hope. 2 days later, she ran into him. Not on purpose. Or at least, that was what she told herself. She had gone to a market in Hongdae to pick up some things for the week, the kind of ordinary errand that fills the gaps between the extraordinary things in a life. It was a Saturday afternoon, crowded and noisy, the kind of place where nobody paid attention to anyone else. She was at a vegetable stall, turning over a head of cabbage, when she looked up and saw him across the aisle. He was buying something. She could not tell what. He was talking to the vendor, and his voice was low, and the vendor was nodding and smiling in a way that suggested he might have been a little afraid, but also a little charmed. Which, Adiz thought, was probably the effect Suhwan had on most people without even trying. He looked up. Their eyes met. He did not look surprised. He looked like he had been expecting her to be there, or at least like her being there was the most natural thing in the world. Adiz, he said. Suhwan, she said. Are you buying cabbage? He asked, looking at her hand. She looked down. She was, in fact, still holding a head of cabbage. I am, she said. It is very good cabbage. He looked at the cabbage. Then at her. Then he said, with the deadpan seriousness of someone who is absolutely, completely joking, the best cabbage I have ever seen. She laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came out loud and surprised both of them. They walked through the market together after that, not talking much, just moving through the crowd side by side, and the ease of it surprised her. The way they fit together in a space, the way their steps fell into the same rhythm without either of them adjusting. It felt like something that should have taken years to build, but it was just there, already, as if it had always been there, waiting under the surface. At one point, they stopped at a stall selling tteokbokki, and she ordered 2 cups without asking him, and he took one without commenting, and they ate standing up in the middle of the market with sauce on their fingers and the noise of Seoul all around them. And it was one of the best afternoons Adiz had had in a very long time. You are different, he said at some point, looking at her sideways. Different how? Lighter. When you are not trying to be anything for anyone. She looked at him, and she thought about all the versions of herself she put on every day. The nurse, the daughter, the girlfriend, the woman who smiled when the world gave her every reason not to. She thought about how exhausting all of those roles were, how heavy they sat, and how standing here, in a market, eating tteokbokki with a man who had once written her a letter she had read 40 times in the past week, she felt, for the first time, like she was just herself. I like this version of you too, she said, quietly. He looked at her for a long moment. And the way he looked at her, it was not the way Raymond looked at her. Raymond looked at her with warmth, with affection, with the comfortable ease of someone who had seen her every morning for years. Suhwan looked at her like she was something he had been searching for without knowing he was searching, and he had just found her, and he was not entirely sure what to do with the fact that she was real. They parted ways at the edge of the market. He offered to drive her home. She said no, she had her car. He nodded, and for a moment they just stood there, facing each other, and the noise of the crowd seemed to fall away. Thank you, she said. For today. I did not plan it, he said. I know, she said. That's what made it nice. She turned to leave. She had walked 3 steps when he said her name. She stopped, turned back. He was still standing where she had left him, hands at his sides, looking at her with that expression, that raw, unguarded thing that he could not quite hide. Be careful, he said. With yourself. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded. And she walked away. That night, Adiz sat on the edge of her bed and stared at nothing for a very long time. Raymond was in the kitchen, making dinner. She could hear him moving around, the sound of pans and water and the low murmur of a podcast he was listening to. He had offered to cook. He did that sometimes when he sensed, in his quiet way, that she needed something. He did not know what was wrong. She had not told him. She pulled out Soo-hwan's letter, the one from the box. She read it again. Slowly, this time, savoring every word the way you savor something you are afraid might disappear. In the letter, he had written about her laugh. About the way she moved through a room. About the way she had once, during a particularly boring class, leaned over and whispered a joke to him that had made him bite his lip to keep from laughing out loud. He had written about how he had never told her any of this, because he did not think he was the kind of person who deserved to say it. He had written that burying the letter in the ground felt like the only way to say it without having to be brave enough to say it to her face. And at the very end, in smaller handwriting, as if he had written it almost by accident, he had written, I hope you are happy. Even if it is not with me. I hope the world gives you everything you deserve. Because you deserve more than anyone I have ever known. Adiz pressed the letter against her chest and closed her eyes. She was in trouble. She knew it. She could feel it the way you can feel the ground shifting beneath you before the earthquake hits. The careful, quiet life she had built, the one with Raymond and the apartment and the routine and the smiles, was starting to crack. Not because anything was wrong with it. Because something was pulling at her from the other side. Something older than the life she had made. Something that had been buried in the ground for 11 years and had just been dug up, and it was louder than anything she had ever heard. The next morning, she called her mother. Mama, she said. I'm here, baby. Something is happening. Blessing was quiet for a moment. Then, the boy from the box? Adiz almost laughed. How did you know? Because you sound like this, Blessing said. You sound like someone who is waking up. The silence stretched between them, warm and full, the way it always was when they talked. I don't know what to do, Adiz said. Yes, you do, Blessing said. You just don't want to do it yet. And that is okay. Take your time. But don't wait so long that the moment passes. Adiz closed her eyes. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Now go eat something. You sound thin. Adiz laughed. A real, full laugh. And for a moment, even with everything that was happening, even with the weight of all of it sitting on her chest, she felt light. 2 days later, Soo-hwan called her at 2 a.m. She was awake. She was always awake at 2 a.m. now, lying in the dark with her mind turning over things she could not stop thinking about. Raymond was asleep beside her, breathing slow and steady. She slipped out of bed, grabbed her phone, and went to the bathroom. She closed the door. She turned on the water. Hi, she whispered. I could not sleep, he said. His voice was different at 2 a.m. Lower. Quieter. Stripped of all the edges. Me neither. A pause. Adiz. Yes. I need to tell you something. And I need you to not say anything until I am done. Her heart was beating faster. She pressed her back against the bathroom wall and held the phone tighter. Okay, she said. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she thought the call might have dropped. Then he spoke. I have been thinking about you since I was 17 years old. Not the way I thought about other people. Not casually. Not in passing. I have thought about you the way you think about something that does not belong to you and that you are terrified of losing even though you never had it. I buried that letter because I thought if I put it far enough away, it would stop. It did not stop. It has not stopped. Not in 11 years. And now you are here, in my life again, and you are laughing and eating tteokbokki and telling me things that no one else tells me, and I am standing here feeling like the most dangerous man in Seoul has just been undone by a woman holding a head of cabbage. The silence that followed was so thick she could barely breathe. I know you are with someone, he said. I know that. I am not asking you for anything. I am not expecting anything. I am just telling you the truth, because you asked me to tell you things that cost me something to say. And this is the thing that costs the most. Adiz did not say anything for a long time. The water was running. Steam was curling up around her face. Her eyes were burning, but she was not crying. Not yet. She was holding something very carefully inside her chest, something fragile and enormous, and she did not want to let it break. Soo-hwan, she said, finally. Yes, I hear you. Another silence. Then, very quietly, okay. And I need you to know something too. He waited. Reading that letter, she said, was the first time in a very long time that I felt like someone really saw me. Not the nurse. Not the girlfriend. Not the woman who smiles at everyone. Me. The actual me. And I have been trying to figure out what to do with that ever since. He did not say anything. He did not need to. They stayed on the phone for another hour, saying very little, just breathing together in the dark. When she finally hung up, she sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, knees drawn up, phone in her hand, staring at the wall. She thought about Raymond. About the notes in the drawer. About the way he kissed her forehead in the morning. About the years they had spent building something together, something real and solid and good. She thought about Soo-hwan. About the letter. About the cabbage. About the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. She thought about her mother. About the cancer. About the way time was doing something cruel and irreversible, and how precious every single day was becoming. And she thought about herself. About the woman she was becoming underneath all the roles she played. The woman who was tired of pretending. The woman who was starting, slowly, painfully, to understand that the life she had built might not be the life she was meant to live. She did not have an answer yet, but she was getting closer. The next week was quiet on the surface. Adiz worked. She came home. She ate dinner with Raymond. She called her mother. She went to bed. She got up. She did it all again. But underneath, everything was moving. She and Soo-hwan did not talk every day anymore. Not because they had stopped wanting to, but because they both seemed to understand, without saying it, that what was building between them needed space. That if they pushed it too fast, it would break. That some things need to be handled gently, the way you handle something that has been buried for a very long time and has just come to the surface, and you want to hold it without crushing it. The next week was quiet on the surface. Adiz worked. She came home. She ate dinner with Raymond. She called her mother. She went to bed. She got up. She did it all again. But underneath, everything was moving. She and Soo-hwan did not talk every day anymore. Not because they had stopped wanting to, but because they both seemed to understand, without saying it, that what was building between them needed space. That if they pushed it too fast, it would break. That some things need to be handled gently, the way you handle something that has been buried for a very long time and has just come to the surface, and you want to hold it without crushing it. She kept the letter in her pocket. Every day. Folded small, the way it had been folded in the box, tucked against her side like something she was carrying back to life. On a Wednesday morning, Dr. Park cornered her in the break room. It was early. The shift had barely started, and the fluorescent lights made everything look harsher than it needed to. Dr. Park was pouring coffee, her back to Adiz, and she said it without turning around, the way she always delivered her words, like they were an afterthought, like they barely mattered. Your charting from last night was incomplete. Adiz stopped in the doorway. She had checked her charting twice before leaving. She knew it was complete. She knew it because she always knew, because she had learned a long time ago that in a place like this, the only thing that truly belonged to you was the work you did, and she refused to let anyone take that from her. I reviewed it before I left, Adiz said, keeping her voice even. Calm. The voice she used with difficult patience, the one that gave nothing away. Dr. Park turned then, coffee in hand, and looked at her with that particular expression, the one that sat somewhere between boredom and contempt. Well, it was not complete. Adiz held her gaze. She did not smile. Not this time. She did not nod or apologize or shrink. She just stood there, steady and still, and let the silence do the work. Dr. Park looked away first. It was a small thing, barely noticeable. But Suyun, who was standing behind Adiz pretending to reach for a mug on the shelf, saw it. And later, in the hallway, she said, very quietly, that was amazing. Adiz shrugged. I'm just tired of apologizing for things that aren't my fault. Suyun looked at her with something like awe. You are honestly the bravest person I have ever met. Adiz almost laughed. If Suyun only knew. Bravery was not what this was. This was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that strips away everything unnecessary until all that is left is the truth. And the truth was that Adiz was done pretending. She pulled out her phone during her next break. A message from Su Hwan, sent that morning, no words, just a small voice note. She put in one earbud and listened. It was him, reading something. A poem. Short, quiet, in Korean. She did not understand all of it, but she understood enough. Enough to know that he had found it and listened to it and thought of her and sent it without explanation because he knew she would understand. She listened to it 3 times. She kept the letter in her pocket. Every day. Folded small, the way it had been folded in the box, tucked against her side like something she was carrying back to life. You seem different lately, Suyun said. Adiz looked up. Different how? Suyun tilted her head, studying her. I don't know. Happier maybe? But also kind of sad? Like both things at the same time. Adiz thought about that. That's a very accurate description, she said. Are you okay? Adiz smiled. And for once, it was not the smile she wore for everyone else. It was the real one, the one that was complicated and messy and a little bit broken, and also a little bit beautiful. I'm figuring some things out, she said. Suyun nodded, like that made perfect sense. Because in some ways, it did. That night, Adiz did something she had been putting off for days. She sat down across from Raymond at the kitchen table, after dinner, when the dishes were done and the apartment was quiet, and she said, "Can we talk?" He looked at her. He set down his phone. He gave her his full attention, the way he always did when she asked for it, and something in her chest ached because he was so good at this, at being present, at being the person who showed up. Of course, he said. What's going on? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. What was she going to say? I met someone. No. I remembered someone. No. Something is happening inside me that I do not fully understand yet, and I am terrified of it, and I am also more alive than I have been in years, and I do not know how to reconcile any of that with the life I have built with you. She could not say any of that. Not yet. Not tonight. So instead, she said something smaller. Something true, but smaller. I think I need to make some changes. At work. In my life. I have been carrying a lot, and I think I need to stop pretending that I am fine when I am not. Raymond looked at her. And something shifted in his expression, something that looked less like surprise and more like recognition. Like he had been waiting for her to say this. Like he had seen it coming and had not known how to bring it up himself. Okay, he said. What do you need? I don't know yet, she said. But I wanted you to know that something is changing. He reached across the table and took her hand. He held it gently, the way he always held things, with care and warmth and a steadiness that had never once wavered in all the years she had known him. "I am here," he said. "Whatever you need. I am here." She squeezed his hand. She looked at him, really looked at him, and she felt the full, terrible weight of the choice that was coming. The one she could not avoid forever. The one that would cost her something no matter which way she turned. "I know," she said. "Thank you, Raymond." They sat together in the quiet kitchen, holding hands, and the silence between them was different than it had been before. Not empty. Not comfortable. Something else. Something that sounded, if you listened closely, like the sound of two people standing on opposite sides of a door that was about to open, and neither of them knowing what was on the other side. Later, alone in the bathroom again, Adiz looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked beautiful, in the way she always looked beautiful, strong and soft at the same time, carrying something heavy with grace. But there was something else in her eyes now. Something new. Something that had not been there before the ceremony, before the box, before the letter, before the man who had written it. She pulled out her phone. She opened her messages. She stared at Soo-hwan's name for a long time. Then she typed, "I need to see you again. Soon." The reply came in 20 seconds. "Name the time. Name the place. I will be there." She smiled. Quietly. To herself. And somewhere in a penthouse in Gangnam, Choi Soo-hwan, the man they called the architect, the most feared man in Seoul, set his phone down on the table and pressed his hand against his chest, right over the place where something had been aching for 11 years. And for the first time in a very long time, it did not hurt. It was just beginning. But Adiz was not ready. Not yet. Not entirely. Because there was still Raymond. There was still the apartment and the notes in the drawer and the life she had built, piece by careful piece, out of love and loyalty and the belief that good was enough. And there was still the question that sat in the middle of all of it, the one she could not answer yet, the one that kept her awake at night in the dark, the one that Blessing had heard in her voice on the phone. The one that Soo-hwan had felt in the silence between them, the one that Adiz was starting, very slowly, to understand was not really a question at all. It was a choice. And she was not done making it. Not yet. But she was getting close. And the man who had waited 11 years for her to even know he was waiting? He was not going anywhere. Not this time. The rain came back the next night. The same kind of rain that had fallen for 3 days before the ceremony, the heavy, relentless kind that filled the streets and turned the city gray and made everything feel like it was waiting for something to break open. Adiz stood at the window of her apartment, watching it fall, Raymond's warmth somewhere behind her in the kitchen, Soo-hwan's letter in her pocket, and she thought, this is not the end of the story. This is just where it starts to get real.